enough to hold such a number, so they were released on parole for appearance at court. When court met, every man served with a capias. Hold your horses just a minute," interrupted Quince Forrest. "I want to get that word. I want to make a memorandum of it, for I may want to use it myself sometime. Capias. Now I have it. Go ahead." When court met, every man served with a bench warrant from the judge presiding was present, and as soon as court was called to order, a squad of men arose in the courtroom, and the next moment the judge fell riddled with lead. Then the factions scattered to fight it out, and I was passing through the county while matters were active. They confiscated my gun and all the ammunition in the packs, but helped me to repack and started me on my way. A happy thought struck one of the men to give me a letter which would carry me through without further trouble, but the leader stopped him, saying, "Let the boy alone. Your letter would hang him as sure as hell's hot before he went 10 miles farther." I declined the letter. Even then I didn't have sense enough to turn back, and inside of 2 hours I was rounded up by the other faction. I had learned my story perfectly by this time, and those packs had to come off again for everything to be examined. There was nothing in them now but flour and salt and such things, nothing that they might consider suspicious. One fellow in this second party took a fancy to my horse and offered to help hang me on general principles, but kinder counsels prevailed. They also helped me to repack, and I started on once more. But before I reached my destination the following evening, I was held up 7 different times. I got so used to it that I was happily disappointed every shelter I passed, if some man did not step out and throw a gun in my face. I had trouble to convince the cattle hunters of my experiences, but the absence of any ammunition, which they needed worst, at last led them to give credit to my tale. I was expected home within a week, as I was to go down on the Nueces on a cow hunt which was making up, and I only rested 1 day at the hunters' camp. On their advice I took a different route on my way home, leaving the mules behind me. I never saw a man the next day returning, and was feeling quite gala on my good fortune. When evening came on, I sighted a little ranch house some distance off the trail, and concluded to ride to it and stay overnight. As I approached, I saw that someone lived there, as there were chickens and dogs about, but not a person in sight. I dismounted and knocked on the door, when, without a word, the door was thrown wide open, and a half a dozen guns were poked into my face. I was ordered into the house and given a chance to tell my story again. Whether my story was true or not, they took no chances on me, but kept me all night. One of the men took my horse to the stable and cared for him, and I was well fed and given a place to sleep, but not a man offered a word of explanation, from which I took it they did not belong to the vigilance faction. When it came time to go to bed, one man said to me, "Now, sonny, don't make any attempt to get away, and don't move out of your bed without warning us, for you'll be shot as sure as you do. We won't harm a hair on your head if you're telling us the truth, only do as you're told, for we'll watch you." By this time I had learned to obey orders while in that county, and got a fair night's sleep, though there were men going and coming all night. The next morning I was given my breakfast. My horse, well cuffed and saddled, was brought to the door, and with his parting advice I was given permission to go. "Son, if you've told us the truth, don't look back when you ride away. You'll be watched for the first 10 miles after leaving here, and if you've lied to us, it will go hard with you. Now remember, don't look back, for these are times when no one cares to be identified." I never questioned that man's advice. It was "die dog or eat the hatchet" with me. I mounted my horse, waved the usual parting courtesies, and rode away. As I turned into the trail about a quarter of a mile from the house, I noticed 2 men ride out from behind the stable and follow me. I remembered the story about Lot's wife looking back, though it was lead and not miracles that I was afraid of that morning. For the first hour I could hear the men talking and the hoofbeats of their horses as they rode along always the same distance behind me. After about 2 hours of this one-sided joke, as I rode over a little hill, I looked out of the corner of my eye back at my escort, still about a quarter of a mile behind me. One of them noticed me and raised his gun, but I instantly changed my view, and the moment the hill hid me, put spurs to my horse, so that when they reached the brow of the hill I was a half a mile in the lead, burning the earth like a caned dog. They threw lead close around me, but my horse lengthened the distance between us for the next 5 miles, when they dropped entirely out of sight. By noon I came into the old stage road, and by the middle of the afternoon reached home after over 60 miles in the saddle without a halt. Just at the conclusion of Bull's story, Flood rode in from the herd, and after picketing his horse, joined the circle. In reply to an inquiry from one of the boys as to how the cattle were resting, he replied, "The herd is breaking into trail life nicely. If we'll just be careful with them now for the first month, and no bad storms strike us in the night, we may never have a run the entire trip. That last drink of water they had this evening gave them a nightcap that'll last them until morning. No, there's no danger of any trouble tonight." For fully an hour after the return of our foreman, we lounged around the fire, during which time there was a full and free discussion of stampedes. But finally Flood, suiting the action to the word by arising, suggested that all hands hunt their blankets and turn in for the night. A quiet wink from Bull to several of the boys held us for the time being, and innocently turning to Forrest, Durham inquired, when was it you that was telling someone about a run you were in last summer? I never heard you tell it. Where was it?" "You mean on the Cimarron last year when we mixed 2 herds," said Quince, who had taken the bait like a bass and was now fully embarked on a yarn. "We were in rather close quarters, herds ahead and behind us, when one night here came a cow herd like a cyclone and swept right through our camp. We tumbled out of our blankets and ran for our horses, but before we could bridle, Bull had given us the wink, and every man in the outfit fell back, and the snoring that checked the storyteller was like a chorus of ripsaws running through pine knots. Forrest took in the situation at a glance, and as he arose to leave, looked back and remarked, "You must all think that's smart." Before he was out of hearing, Durham said to the rest of us, "A few doses like that will cure him of sucking eggs and acting smart," interrupting folks. End of chapter 3.